And welcome. Today I'm very excited to be joined by Dr. James Robson, who is Scottish Rugby's Chief Medical Officer. So James, thank you for joining.
Yeah, you're welcome, Andy. Nice to be here.
Great, yeah. I actually thought that behind you is a big needle, but it's actually a spaceship.
It's actually, yeah. As a child, I was fascinated by space travel and, the launch of the Saturn V rocket. That's one of the Lego models. It was my first effort at having a hobby in the first lockdown.
Oh, nice. Looks like you made the most of it anyway. That's very good.
Absolutely. I needed the help of one of my daughters just to make sure that I put the pieces in the right place.
Very good. Very good. So getting into it then, where are you from originally, James?
Originally from Whitehaven in Cumbria, then moved up to Edinburgh to do my physiotherapy training, and then up to Dundee, which is now my adopted home. I haven't moved out of Dundee. I commute to Murrayfield and to Glasgow to help with the two pro teams and the national team.
All right, very good. So so going back, you've got that interesting journey into medicine. So what made you want to do physio in the first place?
It was always a love of sport. Even in those days, there wasn't much in the way of sport, but I had an aunt who was a physiotherapist. I'd had an illness at school, so I was told that perhaps I wouldn't get the grades that I needed to do medicine. In the end, I actually did quite well, but I still carried through with my physiotherapy, and I've never regretted it, because that gave me a sort of musculoskeletal slant on what was later to become a medical career, and that helped me in getting involved with rugby.
Right. So when you were doing that physio course, then was it medicine that you ideally would have gone for at that point?
I'd thought about medicine, and as I say, with the careers advice at school, etc., and with illness, I kind of was put off that. So it never really occurred to me. Applied to do physio, went to do physio, and really started to enjoy it. And then later on, thought I'd quite like to complement it. I also, in those days, I got a little fed up of junior doctors trying to tell me what my job was as a physio, and I just thought, yeah, do you know what? I think I can do your job, so let's have a go.
Oh no, that's great. So when you were doing the physio, then, like, at what point did you think, right, yeah, sport may be something I want to do? What was the thought process whilst you were doing that degree?
Kind of a bit of haphazard. Completed my physio, worked for a couple of years as a physio before moving to from Edinburgh to Dundee to do medicine. And then I got a call out of the blue. I was basically, as a medical student, I then was working as a physio at weekends and in the holidays, just to get some extra money. And one of the people I was working with, her boyfriend played for North Midlands District, and they parted company with a guy who was then their sort of rubs man. In those days, there were very few qualified physios. The rubs man had turned up once too often, a little worse for wear. So they were looking for somebody for the last game, and this lass had said, "Oh, I'm working with a guy who was a physio before he did medicine." Apologies for the interruption there. And I got the invite, went along to do that, and they were reasonably impressed with me, asked me back the following season. So I got into doing district kind of rugby and club rugby. And then later on, after I qualified as a doctor, I got a phone call out of the blue to say, would I be available to go with Scotland as a physio, not as a doctor at that time, to their tour of Canada and the States. And yeah, things have just progressed since then.
Right. Okay. I'll come on to that bit, because that's really interesting. If you were a doctor whilst you're actually doing physio duties. But so, how long after qualifying as a physio did you decide to do medicine?
2 years. Yeah, I decided. I was going. Whatever I did, I was going to make sure that I'd done my basic work as a physio. I've since met over the years one or two physios that have basically gone from one course to the other. Kind of really feel that you need to learn a certain amount to get through your exams, but you certainly learn more when you actually have to work, and that was the reason why, as I say, when I became a medical student, I was then working locally as a physio in the hospitals, which gave me a real edge to my medical career when we finally came on as clinical students. You do 3 years of book work and small work, and then you get let loose on the wards. And I remember being in my group of medical students at the back, going onto one of the wards I'd worked as a physio, and the sister of the ward said, "Oh, James, very man, could you see the lady in Bay 1?" And I have to say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but I'm here as a medical student today. I'm not here as a physio."
Yeah. Yeah. So were there many other people with that background then of the physio going into it on your course?
No, at my time, I only knew of about half a dozen, and all of that half a dozen people, sort of in my era, were women, and three of them actually got married and stopped working. So I think it was 4 of us kind of qualified in that way. It's not very common now, but it's more common. As I say, I have met other people that have done physiotherapy and then either done medicine or gone on to do sports science and sports and strength and conditioning.
Right, yeah. And so when you got that call from Scotland then asking you to go and work with the team as a physio, like how long did you finish your medical course at that point?
I was in the second year after my medicine, because I was with the rugby teams that I was working with. Of course, I was acting both as a physio and a doctor, for about a couple of years, and then got a call from the then honorary medical officer for Scotland saying, would I be available, because the guy that was incumbent in the post at that time was working in the NHS and couldn't get enough holidays off to service the Scotland team. So it was, you got to remember, this was the amateur era, and although it was international rugby, you were still beholden to people to use their holidays or to get time off from work.
Yeah, and was it something that you like? Was it really flattering, exciting when you got that call?
Unbelievable, absolutely over the moon. Totally out of the blue. I was delighted to be working at district level, and although I'd go along to internationals, in those days I'd never contemplated being invited in to do international. I think nowadays people would view it in a different way. We've got junior doctors coming through, qualifying in their sports medicine, and then looking to try and get into international straight away. In that bygone era, it was very much almost as an apprenticeship. You served your time in the club, and then if you were lucky, you got to district level, and if you were luckier still, perhaps you'd get with an age grade team to be invited to go on a tour to Canada and the States. With Scotland was just a dream come true.
And so what was that first tour like?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I was very privileged on the way out, and everybody will know this name. I was sat beside Doddy Weir, and right. Doddy on his first tour with the national team. I'd never met anybody that could eat so much as Doddy, and I'm privileged to say we've been friends ever since. Yeah,
that's amazing. So then when you were doing that, so you had a day job that you were working. Whereabouts were you working whilst you were doing the
a variety of things, because I was in effect a junior doctor. So I'd done my what we call our house jobs. I was funnily enough, I was an SHO in obstetrics and gynecology when I actually went on tour with Scotland. So yeah.
Yeah. So what was it then? Was it just the fact that you'd had that experience with the rugby?
It was because I was working with the district side that that was the attraction, and because I was qualified as a physio as well. So I think that was the deciding factor. And then when I came back, it was World Cup year, and I got asked if I would do the World Cup because the guy that I'd replaced had resigned from the NHS and had got a full-time job in professional football. He'd kind of been headhunted from the rugby. So that fell into my lap as well, because I'd just been on tour and I'd kind of kept my nose clean, as it were, and done a reasonable job. I was invited back to do the World Cup in '91, and of course we got through to the semi-finals.
Yeah. So how was that then? Like, I mean, all of a sudden you're just in a World Cup. Like, what was that experience like for you?
Oh, incredible! It's just six weeks out of your life working, in top class sport in those days. 91, six years still before people became professional. But to be working at that level, the World Cup games were fantastic. Of course, largely home based for us at Murrayfield because it was a UK based World Cup, and sadly, from our point of view, we were narrowly beaten by England in the semi-final, so didn't make the final. Made the third and fourth place playoff against the All Blacks down in Cardiff.
Mm. Yeah, and so after you've done that experience, then, so how involved were you with the Scottish team, and how much of like your week was spent with them or month?
Yeah, so I'll give you an interesting fact, Andy. In the early days, I was able to do the Scotland national team, the Scotland A team, and still be involved with the district side and the club side using your holidays. Nowadays, yeah, I'm in full-time CMO with Scotland. We're just about to come into the autumn camp series, so we'll be in for 5 weeks. My wife calculated at one point that we've spent more than a third of our married life apart because of rugby. That's the kind of commitment that both the backroom staff and the players have at that level.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. That is a massive change, and we'll come on to some other things. But that's on that point. Like, do you miss that time where you could do everything and you had full ownership and control of those things?
I miss the time when we weren't all quite so busy, Andy. Nowadays, you don't know where the day goes to. It starts early, it finishes late. You wonder where the weekends go. If I'm not with the team, I'm by and large trying to find the time to both have some family time and watch rugby, because you want to see firsthand in case there are any injuries that might affect the international team. And just from a general knowledge point of view, you're liaising with other medical teams. We've got a number of players playing in exile clubs, so liaising with them, liaising with those teams, and just keeping a track on it. And then you've got the head coach dropping messages to myself, Stu Pat, the senior national team physio, at weekends. So it becomes almost all-consuming. Really, the only escape is when you do manage to find some time to take annual holidays, and in particular, if I get a chance to go abroad, you turn off the works mobile, stick it in the drawer, and forget to take it with you.
Yeah, and does that work out often?
It doesn't work as often as I'd like.
Yeah, yeah, and then so after '91, then so the World Cup was in South Africa. So how?
The World Cup in '95 was in South Africa.
Sorry, yeah,
UK, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. The next one after '91 was in South Africa. Then I mean that was the first one that I properly remember, and it was just absolutely huge, just from the fact that South Africa, they're opening up. How was that then to be actually involved directly with that?
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, I mean, I see all my involvement with rugby as having been a privilege. The only good thing for me is, of course, nowadays it's not only a privilege, but you get paid to be there, and that's the big change between the amateur and the professional era. But of course, that was my first big tour abroad. You're involved in a World Cup and you're in South Africa. Foreign place, lots of sights and sounds. Apartheid was coming to an end. Nelson Mandela there, and ultimately the South Africans winning. But the privilege of moving around a country, a couple of days off and going on safari and seeing the big five. Lots of privileges attached to the team. It's hard work, but you get to go to places and meet people that you could only imagine as a layperson.
Were there any particular things that stood out from that because of like the momentous nature of that event compared to other big tournaments that you're involved with?
It was very much just the enormity of the changes that country was undergoing, and it was such a privilege to be there and to be talking to local people, and the excitement around those changes, and the pride in having such a major tournament in the country at the time. I think, Andy, those are the kind of things that hold me. As well as the likes of the travel out, we were very lucky. Virgin Atlantic, I think, were the carrier that we had. There was an onboard incident early in the flight that I had to attend to or was asked to attend to as a medic. And one of the privileges which we don't get now, I was asked to go up front to the cabin, meet the captain, who wanted to thank me for what I did, which was fairly minor, and then just losing track of time, staying up there chatting to him and the co-pilot, asking them questions about air travel and flying aircraft, and swapping them for rugby stories.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time. And then at what point did you get started with the Lions? Because you guys played a major role with them. How did that happen?
My first tour was the tour to New Zealand, and that was largely because Ian McGeechan had was Scotland coach at the time when I was with the World Cup, and of course it wasn't lost on him that he could perhaps take a doctor who was a physio, because they would then have effectively two physios involved with the team. It used to be a doctor and a physio, so I would double up as a second physio. So I was lucky, and that was the start of then six consecutive Lions tours, which for me was just, again, I said it was a fairy tale getting to work with Scotland, but you can imagine being invited to the Lions and then having not only the Scotland-based players that you'd admired and worshipped, but all the greats from the other countries, the likes of Wade Dooley and Mike Teague, and from England, Ian Evans from Wales, and Neil Jenkins, these kind of people. Keith Wood, ultimately from later tour from Ireland. Such a privilege not only to meet these people, but to be living with them day in and day out for weeks on end.
Yeah. No, I can imagine there's quite a lot of sort of fun rivalry goes on between all of that side as well.
Yeah, there's more hijinks in some of the early tours than there is nowadays, both in the international team and, the advent of professionalism has toned down a certain amount of activity, and possibly rightly so. But yeah, no, fun times, and some of which you can't mention in public.
Yeah, well, I won't delve too much into all of that. So when you're getting asked to double up as a physio, then, so how onerous is that on you then, where you're having to do?
No, I don't have to do so much now. I make sure that I stay well within my limits. I make sure that the physios, if they're wanting me to do something, I do it under their direction. Principally now, I'm a doctor with a physiotherapy background, but it does mean that I can help out with a bit of strapping and stuff like that, just to alleviate things. But by and large, we're well staffed nowadays with international teams, particularly.
Yeah, and there was a real high-profile incident in '97 with Will Greenwood. It's been well documented across the board. That experience. Just talk to me about just roughly what happened.
I think what you've got to remember is that things have changed over the years, and of course you always imagine that you're well trained, and what strikes me is Will was lucky and everything worked out well. But since that kind of incident, and particularly with an incident involving Tom Evans in Wales, these are two big incidents that have taught me how much we need training. What we say is that training, practice makes perfect, or at least it might help. And I think just the level of training that the medical teams, the S&C teams undergo nowadays for caring for players is immeasurably better than the time in South Africa. I remember attending to Will, being in the medical room and thinking any minute now there'd be another more senior doctor take over from me, and that never materialized. We've evolved a much greater process of backup medical care, particularly for the international sides, than we ever had then. Used to just largely be a mixture of, there'd be one team doctor for one side, one for the other, and perhaps, if you're lucky, a match doctor. Now, if you go to an international, you can expect maybe half a dozen consultants of various sorts helping you out in your hour of need. So, yeah, reflecting on it, Will was lucky. We didn't encounter anything too nasty, but nowadays everybody is so much better prepared. Incidentally, we run a pitchside care course called ScrumCAPS, Scottish Rugby Union Medical Cardiac Pitchside Care. We've got a course that we did a few weeks ago. I've got another course that I'm teaching on Sunday before coming into national camp. So we have this commitment. World Rugby run fair courses, first aid in rugby. They run and promote level 2 and level 3 care courses. The level 3 that we run is the equivalent for the pitchside doctors of what the paramedics do to be, ambulance crews.
Yeah, no, it's great to see the development of it, and it's all the infrastructure that's being put in place now. So then just talk to me about, so from 97, what like other ones, I mean, I'll actually just jump, because I happened to be in Australia in 2001. I was just backpacking, and I remember staying in King's Cross, and several of the team did turn up in one of the places that I was in. And I mean, that was absolutely epic, as most of the Lions side is. But like, do you remember anything about that particular tour in Australia?
The tour in Australia strikes me that, yeah, everywhere is immense to travel to, but Australia, for whatever reason, Lions supporters flock to. And I remember going out of the hotel one morning and just found that the street was a sea of red, and then things have built on since then. It's just incredible. So to me, it's the support, the level of support that you get in these countries, not only through expats but from travellers. Sadly, of course, that was missing in the recent Lions tour. I feel really sorry for the players and for the fans because of the pandemic. But it's an immense experience, and certainly, one of these days when I finally retire, finally pull the plug, I'll be looking forward to actually being a tourist on one of the tours.
Are there any ones that particularly stand out for you?
97. You can't go past 97. First Lions win for myself. Being in South Africa, the media being totally dismissive of the Lions. I remember headline calling us pussycats, and each time the Lions won, the press said, yeah, but wait until the next game, and wait until the next game. And of course, history shows that we got a 2-1. The winning test match in Durban. I remember the Shark Stadium, the Durban Stadium at that time, is just a feat of architectural majesty. Such steep banks of real vehement supporters, and largely silenced by the win by the Lions. But afterwards, the South Africans were incredibly gracious in defeat, just congratulating the boys on being the best side and coming through adversity and winning. Sadly, I missed the about 4 hours of the celebrations because I was stuck in anti-doping and doping control with one of the players who was so dried out from the exertions in the game that it took him 4 hours to pass the urine sample he needed to do.
Yeah, occupational hazards of those things. So what was that like then? So you're going in, you're playing against the World Cup holders, going out there. It's like, what was the atmosphere like? Because I imagine they were still buzzing from the 2 years
absolutely
previous.
Electric place. And as I say, we were welcomed with open arms in the hotels. The hotel staff couldn't get over the fact that we were there. Immensely proud of their own team, but so welcoming. That's what I found with rugby the world over, but particularly going to South Africa. Such a proud rugby tradition in the country, and just delighted to have us there. And it was that overwhelming sort of support and welcoming nature of everybody that just made the tour such a pleasure.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that is. I mean, and then how do you can you compare or contrast what it's like in terms of the three places that you visit with the Lions? And is there any particular noticeable differences?
Everything has its notes. You go to New Zealand and there's that famous joke. Half the population want to be an All Black, and the other half want to be married to them. Rugby's everything in there. Australia somewhat less because they're competing with Aussie rules and rugby league, etc. But still incredible welcome, and because both New Zealand and Australia in particular have a big heritage. Particularly from Scotland and England, then you've always got that welcoming nature. And then you've got South Africa, a land of immense natural beauty, very proud rugby heritage, desperate for people to be there to visit the country. It's hard to pick out, you can have your favourite, but each of those you just love going back to for different reasons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how would you say it compares to being involved with the Lions to being involved with the national team?
I always said that, when I was with the district side, fantastic, and then the national team was what I thought was the ultimate level. What I would say, if you're touring with the Lions, just takes it up yet another notch. There is nothing to compare to that. It is truly a global sporting occasion, and just the mixing of the fans from the four home unions just makes it special. You can't really compare them, Andy. It's wonderful and a privilege to be with Scotland, but to have been with the Lions as well is just that ultimate for the backroom staff as well as the players. I think that's what you've got to get over. People always talk about the players, about the pride, about the desperation to play. It's the same with the backroom staff. And once you've been once, you have a massive hunger for wanting to be there again.
Yeah, definitely. And then we're talking about your time with Scotland then. So you've passed the 250 mark, which is absolutely incredible in terms of doing that. Sorry to sort of dwell on that one, but
it's not so much a time thing, but yeah, I'm immensely proud and humbled to say that I've done 250 international tests with Scotland, and of course I've done 19 Lions tests. So yeah, at what point do you stop? But 250 sounded a fairly magical thing. I remember when Ross Ford got his 100th cap, it coincided with, in effect, my 200th cap, and I loved getting my picture taken with Ross because it's one of my favourite all-time players. And you just got these little milestones. It just suddenly creeps up. I don't remember counting my first 100, but I do remember thinking, hang on a minute, and sitting down with one of the guys that looks after the library and knows all the records and saying, just how many have I been involved with? And then suddenly finding that, you've had over 200 players get their caps in the time that you've been there. You're on your 250th game, and who knows how many more. You just got to hope that they continue and hope that you'll know. And this is what I'm almost wrestling with now. You just got to hope when is the right time to say, guys, it's somebody else's turn. It's very difficult to give up, Andy, I can assure you.
I'm quite sure it is. And could you comprehend, like, when you're that first time you're called up, do you even have any forethought or any ideas of what the future holds for you?
No, I honestly thought that. Certainly, I thought the tour to Canada and the States with Scotland was a one-off. I was filling in for somebody else. Never dreamed that job might become partly my own. So, and certainly never in those days envisaged there would necessarily be a full-time role in professional sport for myself. I'd kind of set my sights on being a GP, doing sport and rugby part time. Yeah.
Yeah. And are there any particular games in that period? I mean, I know that's a difficult question to ask, that you just think that was just absolutely incredible.
Oh, I marvel at some of the rugby that we see now. I was watching the Edinburgh Scarlets game just a couple of weeks ago, and I was in awe of both sides as to the skill level. I think the speed of the game has changed immeasurably over. But if you asked me to pick out one game, it would have to be, that test match in Durban and Jeremy Guscott's winning drop goal. And it's just that association. There've been some tremendous games of rugby over the time, and sometimes, sadly, you have to say, even being on the losing side, you can admire the two teams for the game that they've just played. But yeah, no, I love watching rugby. I love, in effect, I have the best seat in the house. They talk about the best seat in the house, and of course, the commentators may say that they've got the best seat. No, the pitch side medics have the best seat.
But do you feel like you can actually enjoy the game? It's like you can obviously appreciate the atmosphere.
You can enjoy it to a certain extent, and that certain extent extends to kickoff. After that, you're there to do a job of work, and you've got to hope that you actually enjoy it after the final whistle. I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I love being at pitch side. I don't think enjoyment's the correct phrase to use for that 80 odd minutes that you're on duty, because you've really got to keep your wits about you. It is so easy to actually start watching the ball and watching the game as a spectator. That's not why you're there. And that's what I would say. It's one of the lessons I've learned over many years. And I would say to the youngsters, just remember why you're there. Enjoy the occasion, and more so enjoy it afterwards. But for the duration of the game, you're on duty and you're there for the players.
Yeah, and just hope that you're not needed. I guess that's.
I love games where perhaps I get a run on for somebody and they say, James, I'm just winded. You love that kind of game, because you don't want to see anybody injured on either side. Sadly, in a contact sport at the moment, you're always likely to see injury in some form or other, but you hope that everybody comes off intact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I actually asked this question to Prav Mathema, and you did get a mention for it in terms of giving him the opportunity. But who would you say has had an impact or been influential in your career?
I think the person to invite me first was a guy called Donald MacLeod, who's a surgeon, and he was honorary medical officer for Scotland for 26 years. Later became president by view of being president of Selkirk Rugby Club. Donald was actually, coincidentally, he was one of the joint examiners in my final practical exam for physiotherapy. And then, several years later, he's the person that phones me up and said, would you be available to go to Scotland? Scotland's a very small place, of course, in comparative terms. So I would say Donald, and then I would say Phil Pask. Phil was England physio for many years. And yeah, Phil had a lot of sort of sayings and phrases and things. I remember him saying to me one day, James, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people that would love to be here on tour in our place, because he was both with England and with me on Lions tours. And he said, the reality is there are very few people that would actually do the job a second time because of the time commitment, the stress, touring and looking after it, etc. And I think he is entirely right. It's not a job for everybody. It's a job that maybe everybody desires, but the reality is that there's a great deal of sacrifice in there. And Phil had an immense way about him and just a professionalism with the players that I truly admired and learned an awful lot of, just both as a man, as a character, and as a professional.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And in terms of, I don't normally ask for two professions, but what would you say your advice would be to someone looking at physio, medicine, or anything, getting into that area?
Either career, Andy, are wonderful careers to be in. What I would reiterate is that you need to do your groundwork, you need to do your due diligence, you need to make sure you take all your training opportunities, and then it's a case of you can't expect just to fall into top jobs. You've really got to look for experience, and that might be with volunteering for a local club. Maybe look for shadowing experience, speak to people, go and watch them in action, and then just follow your chosen career, and always be mindful of the fact that every now and again an opportunity comes, and if you're able to take it, and you never know, as one door opens, another may close. As one door closes, another may open. My outlook on life is partly what's for you won't go past you, but it's also about the fact that you make your own luck. And so if you get yourself into a position where people may wish to employ you, that's the way to do it. But either career, just be aware, neither of those two careers, and certainly working in professional sport, isn't a 9 to 5 job. It isn't a Monday to Friday job. I'm on 24-hour, 7-day-a-week call when I'm with the team. At home, I can turn my mobile off, and people will phone the home number, or they'll try my personal email. Or my wife and I were out in the Highlands doing a walk. We were 12 miles in on a 15-mile hike, and her phone went off, and she answered it, and then she looked at me and said, "It's for you." There's no escape, Andy.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good note to finish on. That's it. Work never stops. But no, James, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to you about some of your experiences and how you got involved with it. So thank you very much for doing that, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
That's a pleasure. Cheers, Andy.
Thanks, James.